All right, it's Thursday, February the 8th of 2024. And of course, a lot of things are happening in the world, and we'll get to discussions about those and see what the folks have to say about a number of these things that are taking place and their thoughts on them and all along those lines. So I see I've got Rick Rosner with me and Nick Palveda. We'll see who else comes in also. But, Blinken is having some conversation around the whole situation in Israel and Palestine. uh, Blinken was saying that Israel cannot use October 7th as a license to dehumanize others, and he get put that warning out there in Tel Aviv. But he ended his latest Mid East mission after there was a Israeli rejection of the proposed Gaza ceasefire plan, and all along those lines. So definitely, a lot of folks are paying attention to that. And Netanyahu says that Hamas demands on hostages and ceasefire deal are delusional. And that was his exact quote, and all along those lines. So a lot of people are definitely paying attention to that and seeing how things are going in that area. And in Ukraine, the Ukrainians are telling Congress about being kidnapped by Russians, and UN is urging Russia to end forcible transfer of Ukrainian children. And Ukraine's Underground Railroad is rescuing abducted Ukrainian children from Russian re-education camps. So definitely, it does seem like they have their own version of the Underground Railroad and all in that space. And a U.S. drone strike kills Iraq militia leader behind the deadly attack on the American base. So that is something that is going on as well. So we're definitely seeing that. And the Russian election authority rejects pro-peace hopeful Nada Hessen's presidential bid. So it looks like the anti-war election candidate has been barred from running against Putin. Why are we not surprised around that and all along those lines? And South Korea president calls handbag scandal a political maneuvering by his critics. So apparently there's a whole conversation around the Dior bag, a Christian Dior bag that he's got, or maybe some other things that are going on in that space. So yes, it looks like South Korea Yon is defending his wife over her Dior handbag scandal and rejects China's policy concerns in a rare interview. So definitely, sometimes you have those items that you think are wonderful, and sometimes that can get you in hot water and all along those lines. There's a gentleman that has been compared to Mr. Trump, and that is Bolsonaro over there in Brazil, but he has been named a target in Brazil's coup probe. So he's been ordered to surrender his passport. So definitely, it's not just here in the United States, there's other parts of the world as well where folks get into some political mess and all in that space. As a matter of fact, there is one going on in the UK because apparently Rishi Sunak, who's over there in the UK, their prime minister, made a transgender jibe and kind of like a little remark during his visit of a murdered girl's mother, and he is refusing to apologize to Brianna Gay's father over the quote that he had and all along those lines, because definitely it looks like that father is demanding an apology. And definitely it looks like Rishi Sunak says Keir Starmer sad and wrong to link trans jive to the Brianna Gay case. So like I said, you can try to say things and sometimes they can get you in some hot water and all along those lines. And a volcano in Iceland is erupting for the third time since December, and it's definitely spewing lava all over that small island nation as well. So definitely it'll be interesting to see how things are going there. And they're saying it is cutting off hot water to thousands, and you might definitely need hot water if you're over there in Iceland, I would imagine so, since that is definitely a cold area and all along those lines. And then some sad news, and then I'll bring in Rick and other folks that may have some thoughts around some of these news items that I have brought up. But in some sad news, 5 Marines were confirmed dead after their helicopter crashed in Southern California. So that is what took place, and we did mention that on yesterday's news. But yesterday's missing Marines were confirmed dead following the helicopter crash. And in news that is going on in the space of political news going on, it looks like the Supreme Court will be hearing Trump's 14th Amendment case arguments. So definitely they'll be looking at the notion of whether he is eligible or not eligible in Colorado. So the Supreme Court will hear a landmark election case seeking to kick Trump off of the ballot over the Capitol attacks back in 2021. So definitely that is going on. And Nikki Haley is making some noise as well. She is saying that the Nevada's GOP caucus was all a scam in favor of Donald Trump. So she lost that Nevada Republican president primary to none of these candidates. So definitely it looks like she might be having some suffering in that area. In the late night talk show, folks were mocking Nikki Haley's big loss in Nevada. So definitely we're seeing a lot of that going on. And one of Steve's good friends, Mr. Manchin, is on the news again because apparently Manchin's talking about the bipartisan border deal that has been tanked by the Senate GOP. So definitely looks like Senate is expected to vote on Ukraine and Israeli aid after the GOP blocked that border deal and all along those lines. So it'll be quite interesting to see how all of this kind of goes about and what happens in that particular situation and all along those lines. But definitely, like I said, there are a number of things that are going on in the world, and we'll be definitely talking about those on this particular morning. And of course, we do have Kim just coming out of the Super Bowl area, and who knows, maybe either on later today or tomorrow, we'll hear from her and all in that space. But we're definitely hoping to hear from her since she's got some media things that are going on in that space and all along those lines. And by the way, in Georgia, a Georgia baby's decapitation during birth delivery was ruled a homicide. So parents are seeking justice for a baby who was decapitated during delivery at a Georgia hospital. So the decapitation of the baby during excessively forceful delivery was ruled to be a murder. So sometimes even in regular delivery, the doctors can do things that are not all that great and all in that space. But we'll see what folks have to say about that. And of course, people are still trying to figure out why Vladimir Putin granted Tucker Carlson an interview and what the end game is on that, and also what's going to happen on this Mayorkas case as well, because definitely, there was that failed attempt, and there are some folks that are saying that they might try it again. And a candidate that ran for president before and was running against Joe Biden has suspended their campaign. And a lot of people thought it was a long shot campaign in the first place, but this particular candidate was into astrology and all along those lines. So maybe she should have had a prediction that she wasn't going to be doing all that well in the first place. But Marianne Williamson has suspended her long shot Democratic presidential campaign and has dropped out. So I guess it just means that on that side of the ledger, it is just Biden and RFK and all in that ways. And, Biden is also having some issues as well, because in a second mix up this week, Biden talked about meeting with a European leader that is no longer around. So apparently Biden mixed up both Angela Merkel and Helmut Kohl in a second gaffe this week. And Biden claims that he spoke with the German chancellor, who died in 2017 at the first G17 meeting, in one of his latest gaffes and all along those lines. So definitely that is something that some people that are in the Democratic camp are concerned about. But there is also some people that are looking at some of the things that Trump has said as well. So definitely it's not just Biden that has made errors, but there are other people on the campaign trail that have made errors as well. And it looks like Ronna McDaniel has fallen. So the Trump is recommending North Carolina GOP chair Whatley to replace McDaniel at the RNC. So might be somebody from right here in the Tar Heel state that'll be taking over that role and all along those lines. So I'm going to bring in my good friend Nick Palveda and others, and of course Rick Rosner, and see what they've got to say about that and all along those lines. But Nick, what's your thoughts? We might have a North Carolina person running the RNC. I don't know enough about this person, and maybe we'll reach out to them and see if they want to come on the show. But it looks like Ronna McDaniels has fallen from grace and all along those lines. And now it looks like the North Carolina GOP chair, Whatley, may be who is going to take over. So it looks like the person that is running the GOP right here in the Tar Heel state might be who will be running the entire Republican camp. And apparently Mr. Trump is a fan of this particular individual and wants them to have that job and all along those lines. But I just wonder your thoughts around that and all in that way. And then we've got something else that I got to ask you about, because you oftentimes talk about finances, and I've got a financial story that I'm curious to hear about from both you and Rick. But your thoughts about this particular person taking over since Ronald McDaniel has fallen out of grace?
Oh, we should get him on either this show or World Politics in the evening, Mark. So we'll reach out to them and see what they have to say now that the Republican Party has become the party of Trump. And I mean, if he's installing the leadership now, that's pretty big. But it does go back to the theory that I stated about 6 months ago, that you're going to see the Trump and Biden rematch, and then Trump will be the victor, unlike what happened last time. And so all the business people are getting prepared for another roller coaster ride for 4 years. And then afterwards, we don't have to listen to the guy again. But unfortunately, everybody's listening to this that don't like Trump may have 4 more years, 4 more years, 4 more years. In terms of the Supreme Court right now, they're doing oral arguments today about the claim that he can get thrown off the ballot. I don't think they're going to win that. I think Trump's going to win that one. That's one of his winners he has, one of the few winners he has, because again, there was no notice opportunity heard, and there was no civil procedure followed. There was no trial. Okay, I mean, an administrative hearing. I mean, I would say this has got to be one of the easiest cases to win in front of this Supreme Court. There was no trial. And one thing big in law is the federal rules of civil procedure. And if you're in a state, the state rules of civil procedure. And they're quite detailed as to what you can do, how you can do it, what you can present. Well, they didn't follow any rules of civil procedure. None. Okay. So when you do no civil procedure, no notice and opportunity to be heard, how many different ways do you want to get this thing tossed to Colorado and Maine? A Secretary of State, sua sponte, doesn't have the right to huddle their buddies together, have a hearing, and say, okay, he's off the ballot. It just ain't going to happen. So I anticipate Donald Trump will win both those, and he's going to use it as political ammunition for the next several months, because the immunity claim, that's a loser. I don't know why this guy buys losers and winners. You'd think you'd buy the winner and dump your losers. He's holding a two of clubs or 2 of diamonds on the immunity claim, and he keeps holding on to it like, oh, that card.
He's got another case as well, because in New York, the New York Attorney General and Trump lawyers are telling judge they don't want to wait for the civil fraud case and all along those lines, and they are attorneys are apparently responding to a judge's inquiry about whether a former Trump organization executive lied at trial. So it looks like Alan Weisselberg is in negotiations over the perjury plea. So that could be something that could be problematic for former President Trump, but I don't know your thoughts around that. And definitely it looks like there's another issue that is complicating things as well. But what's your thoughts about this other trial, which is the civil?
That's a tougher case, and it may go up on appeal. You have a very interesting legal issue that, and if you follow the case, what happened is the judge decreed him to be guilty of fraud again without a real trial. It was what they call a summary judgment, which, by the way, a lot of judges, that's what they do. They do summary judgments, no trial, send me the facts, send me the affidavits, and I'll make my decision, which he did. And he said, hey, you're guilty of fraud. Well, what? Okay, and Trump actually had some valid arguments against, because in all the statements he sent people, he said, this is our opinion of the valuations. Your opinion could be different. Please seek your own counsel. And he just throw that out like it doesn't exist. Okay. An appellate judge may throw out this whole judgment. In other words, no matter what they do, that thing may get tossed just on that basis of, wait a minute, are you serious? Did you take this into consideration? Now, the thing I found quite interesting is that in this particular case, he didn't request a jury trial. He had a bench trial, which is very interesting. And so now the judge already declared him guilty. Okay. In other words, you're guilty. Now let's go figure out what the damages are going to be. And so I think that's a tough one. It's a tough one going both ways, because today judges do a lot of summary judgment. People have no idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of summary judgments and all in that way. But
Okay,
Lee
so Mark,
actually asked an interesting question. I don't know your thoughts around this, and I mentioned the latest gaffe and everything. But Lee was wondering whether Biden will agree to debate with Trump, and he was also saying, "How about a Super Bowl interview? Because normally they will do one of those sometimes after the
I don't
fact,
think Trump's
sometimes
going to
during
agree
the
to
fact with
debate
the
Biden.
president. Because apparently Trump is offering to do
Yeah.
an interview, and of course we do know that one of the
You
major
may not see any
celebrities out
debate.
there, Taylor Swift, has not necessarily supported Trump, more of a supporter of Biden. But what are our thoughts, and do we want to go after a Trump interview on Pod TV?
You may not see any debate, Mark. In other words, don't be surprised that there is no Republican Democratic presidential debate this year. Do not be surprised because Trump, if he's winning, he doesn't want to debate. And Biden, if he's winning, he doesn't want to debate. And they both think they're winning, so they both probably don't want to debate. So, I wouldn't be surprised if you see no debates this year and people go to the polls. And I also believe it's going to be a lot closer than people think. This is not going to be a slam dunk for either party. Yeah, Rick, you have some
So, for
comments.
people who don't know what summary judgment is, it's where the judge takes a look at the evidence that's ready to be rolled out for a jury and says there's no way any reasonable jury could decide in this direction. And
That is
says,
correct.
so I'm
Yeah.
saying, yeah, let's not go to the trouble of a trial.
Right.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you look at the standard, just no justiciable argument as to law or fact, and the light in most favor of the non-moving party, and I'm going to rule in favor of the plaintiff. Well, if he had that disclaimer clause, which I saw, then that's not a summary judgment, which can easily, because remember, this guy is not an appellate judge; he's a trial judge. That could easily be turned over on appeal, and he'll have a judgment against him. Now, the sad part, he's going to have to put up a big bond because don't be
Yeah,
surprised.
definitely.
And don't be surprised if that gets overturned on appeal.
So
Hey,
Trump,
Nick,
I don't know that Trump cares about winning and losing as much as he cares about using all the legal machinery available to him to just delay and he's like a
Yeah, deny, delay, don't.
he's been involved in 4,900
That's correct. People
lawsuits.
don't realize this guy is extremely litigious, they would say. In other words, he's a real estate guy. And I used to have them as clients when I actually did spend the majority of my time practicing law. And after a while, you can profile real estate people. Number one, they never have any cash because everything's in real estate. Number two, they're highly optimistic. They think their project's going to win. Now, my two major clients, one of them ended up with a bullet in his head and buried in some cement up to his neck so the wild boars would eat it because apparently he had taken money from cash from somebody, and these people who were never convicted, no one found out who did it, were not too happy with him. But in southern Florida, that's what you did with a real estate developer out of control. The other one died in prison because he went to a bank, and what he did is he hired the other strippers to the other banker so he'd get favorable loans. All right. And I'm going, those were my two best real estate clients. No, actually, I had another one who was actually straight. And this guy gave me some really good advice. He said, if you want to make money in real estate, you make it always when you buy.
Hey, Nick, speaking of real estate, because there was a case that involved real estate that was actually in Minnesota and all along those lines and all in that space. And I know that even definitely we're talking about Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump has been involved in some of these items as well. But apparently there was a resort, and yes, they do have resorts in Minnesota as well, where they are thinking that there could have been some unresolved code violations. So I know that even here in North Carolina and other places, there are code violations, and sometimes the owners that just kind of like let them slide and all in that space. And sometimes that can end in disasters, because that is definitely what some people are thinking happened in this particular case with the Lutzen Resort that failed inspections. And definitely looks like the cabin owners are filing lawsuit in that particular case. But I'm just wondering your thoughts around this notion that even in our building society, a lot of people are putting things up that aren't necessarily up for code and aren't necessarily fitting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can see that happen in Boeing, even though it wasn't a building, they didn't put the bloody. It looks like they didn't put the bolts in on the window. I mean, so you're going like, hey, things like that happen, and there's quite a few real estate developers that tend to slide on the rules, and of course that's the reason you have all the inspections, et cetera. but some of them become really sharp at it, Mark. In other words, they don't want to spend what it takes to have a long term. They'd rather put something cheap in, and if the buyer doesn't know, then they don't. The builder does. Builder can do quite well off those financially. The other thing about the real estate people, not that I'm beating them up. Today I don't have many clients who are in real estate. Most of my clients are medical doctors, but at the time I had a lot of real estate developers as practice. Is they do tend to spend a lot of time in court. For the attorneys who are listening, if you want courtroom work, go get real estate people as clients. They live in the court more than I do. And my job, what I try to do is keep people out of court. In other words, the goal is not to go to court. That's why Trump is complete antithesis to what I would try to do, is basically keep the clown out of court and keep his circus away from the judicial system. But because he came from the real estate market, the clown jumps into the courtroom like it's his playground. And the real problem is that when he has the economic advantage. So if you go to court and Trump has billions and he's going after some guy who's got a couple $100,000, he drives him into the ground using litigation. Today, he's going against people that have as much money as he does, and so it ain't that easy. A lot of it's the federal government. So I don't like I say, I don't get that guy as a client. And
I don't think you would have him as a client. Rick,
Trump's normal legal strategy is, say you're a contractor who's done $500,000 worth of work for Trump on one of his buildings. And Trump says, I'm not going to pay. You take him to court. Trump says, well, okay, we'll go to court. It'll take you 3 years. It'll cost you all of your $500,000 in legal fees. So I'm going to pay you $150,000 and you're going to be happy with it. And
he squeezes them. I mean, the thing is that's not an unusual strategy by real estate people. The art of the deal is to and he'll do that against people that don't have the money to go to court. But it's almost like a bully. You'll pick on the weak person. But as I told one attorney who threatened to sue me, I said, look, dude, I have infinite legal capacity. You can go ahead and do what you like, but dude, you ain't going to win it. Mm-hmm. So they move on and they go after somebody who doesn't have infinite legal capacity. So Trump does the same thing. He's a bully animal. So he goes, well, if this, but he's not a smart animal, because otherwise he wouldn't pick on and create what they call it, losers. If you're playing poker, you drop your losers and you keep your winners. He holds on.
Everybody should want a doctor in the family and a lawyer in the family.
No, that makes a lot of sense. But hey, Rick, really quickly, because I have to tease you, because there is another incident that is going on and it involves Los Angeles. So I want to know why you've been sneaking into buildings and all along those lines, because apparently 4 were arrested inside a vandalized downtown Los Angeles skyscraper, and the graffiti tagged LA high rise, according to the police chief of LA, is a worldwide issue. So I'm guessing that he's thinking that this notion of people going into buildings and tagging them and putting up graffiti is a worldwide issue. I don't know that there's a number of other issues I could think of that would be more worldwide and more prominent, but there are a number of people that like to go into buildings and tag them and all along those lines. But I just wondered, because you are in LA, if there's been any conversation around this, and also this notion that the police chief has said that a graffiti tagged LA high rise is a worldwide issue. So I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, I saw my first tagger work. Sorry, I got dogs in the background, but in London I saw a tagger working live for the first time ever. It was, but he wasn't doing somebody with a can of spray paint, just putting his spray painted signature on a trash bin.
That's disgusting.
Or on a building, because sometimes they climb up buildings and sometimes they're like,
these people
are really good at making, good looking stuff with spray paint. And some people, the guy I saw was not very artistic, but
that's what I'm saying. The thing, and if they're really good artists, be a good artist and paint something worthwhile. Don't go vandalize other people's property because for some reason you think spray painting is good for you. I found it to be basically number one, classless. If you want to see a classless person, somebody does that. 2, disgusting. So you have a disgusting, classless person who pulls stunts like that. How much time you want to put them in jail for? That's the reason we would have jails, is for people like that.
My daughter tells me that there's a famous graffiti tagger in London who puts up optimistic messages like I forget the specific messages, but something like, oh no, his message is, I farted in yoga class.
No,
And
but
that's really optimistic.
so that's not optimistic, but he's famous. He's most famous for that message. But in addition to that, he puts up messages of hope. So,
but along those same lines, because
yeah, but there's a time and a place.
you're here in North Carolina and all along those lines, and if you go downtown and everything, and you see, I think there's one in the morning and one in the afternoon, the trains that go by, you will probably notice that several of them have been tagged, and who knows where they've been tagged from. It could have been New York, it could have been Florida, where you're from, but there are a number of people that do tagging on a regular basis, and they do it kind of in the the evening time when they can't be seen, or sometimes they are very bold and do it while they're being watched, like Rick was saying his daughter saw, and all along those lines. But before I get to the issue around school and everything, what is your thoughts, Toby, about this notion of taggers and all along those lines? Because I was not thinking it was a worldwide problem, but apparently the Los Angeles police chief thinks it's a worldwide problem and everything. But what is your take on tagging?
One man's graffiti artist is another man's Bansky.
I don't agree with Bansky either. I think these people are absolutely disgusting. If they want to do it on their property, that's okay. But please don't do it on my property. I'll tell you, if they did it on my property in Florida, they'd been shot by my cousins, my uncles.
Well, some of them are packing too. People, if you try to stop them, you might get.
No. My cousins wouldn't stop them; they would shoot them.
But some of the graffiti artists are, have been known to shoot back.
Yeah, I don't think it's a worldwide problem.
I have 2,000 cousins in Tampa, Florida. They're not going to get too far. I can tell you.
You said you don't think it's a worldwide problem, Jacoby?
I think it is an issue, but that happens. But in looking at what's going on in the world and what's happening, it's not really that doesn't top the list, top 10 list of problems that are happening in the world right now. I
agree, but there is another issue coming back to Minnesota.
Respect for other people and other people's property. What you have is a human being piece of trash that's showing complete lack of respect for people and their property. That's what you got. So there's
another issue that is, hold on a second.
No reason why we should uphold these people as saints, because they're not.
No, nobody's saying that they're saints, but there is another issue that is very much a concern for many people, and it actually comes out of Minnesota, just like the housing issue did and everything. But apparently there's the notion of free applications for federal student aid, and apparently they are piling up, and there are a lot of people that are scrambling because it apparently is leaving the students and the parents scrambling. So they are saying that the delays are making affording college even harder. And amid the rocky free application for federal student aid, the education department is looking to smooth the so far bumpy debut, because we're debuting this money and all along those lines. And it wasn't just Minnesota. I think it's a national program, but apparently it's kind of on a bumpy plan and all along those lines. So there are ways that you can get your education and get some nice little funding, but apparently they have rolled out this program and have not rolled it out effectively and all along those lines. So I just want to
whose fault is it? What's holding it up?
There's a number of things that are holding it up. It looks like some of the paperwork, the way that government works and all along those lines, but I'll definitely pull it up to give you some more details as to what.
Rick, did your daughter go to King's College completely on a free scholarship?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I think. I'm not sure, but I think most people going for a doctorate get funded. That you put together a proposal, and then they say, well, this. And it's been a good deal for King's College because she did a good job, and she's.
But to answer your question,
she's on the BBC.
She becomes a graduate assistant too, I would assume.
She was, her only job was to complete this research and write this book length thesis. But it's good for King's College because she did a good enough job that she was picked up by the BBC, the radio station over there. Wow. And she goes on there and it helps raise the prestige of King's College.
Right.
But hold on a second, Nick and Rick, to answer your question, the new free application for federal student aid, FSA forms, which were marketed as sometimes speaking of marketing, and we talk about that even with the presidential elections and everything, as a simpler and easier process for parents and students, have turned into a nightmare, giving families anxiety and stress over whether their students will have what they need for scholarships and college acceptance deadlines. So the forms already got off to a late start, launching in late December rather than October. And when they were finally released online, there were complications that led to the form getting taken down multiple times and families unable to fix any mistakes that they had put on the forms as well. So it sounds like it was a bureaucratic nightmare because officials
sounds like a Department of Education screw up.
It is totally that, because they're saying that officials from say information from the FSA forms won't actually be given to schools until March, leading families to tell certain media outlets that their minds are spinning with concerns over missing scholarship deadlines, and if they get a final offer from the schools before their student has to decide if they want to attend. So there's a lot of people that are going to be very confused and seeing if their kids get to go any of this money that is there. And definitely, like I said, they were touting it as a newer, quicker way because of all of the ways that it is tied in to the new way of doing things in terms of online and all of that.
But this is where the counseling comes in, and they don't counsel kids really well on this. There's two types of money. There's good money to take. Those are grants, scholarships. You don't have to pay them back. Then there's bad money. It's called loan. That you have to pay back. So what you want to do is go after the grants and the scholarships. Forget the loans and the loan pushers that are out there. Unfortunately, the loan pushers are winning the battle. They have 1.6 trillion in student loans out there. And this tells me that our educational system is doing a horrible job, not a bad job, a horrible job counseling people on basic finances. And then I also say, hey, look overseas and look places you can go to school for free. A matter of fact, they just had on the internet all the Ivy League classes you can take for free. Some of the Ivy League has a lot of money, and some non-Ivy League schools like Stanford, who just joined the ACC mark, they have like endowments of $34 billion to help scholarship the students. Florida State didn't want them, but screw Florida State. If they leave, they're a poor school. They have $800 million in endowment. They're a poor school. Get rid of them. Forget it. Stanford is the one you wanted. Absolutely no question. They're a prize school to bring into the ACC. Florida State is not. But you have to be smart about money. In other words, grants versus loans, scholarships versus loans, free tuition, and all the stuff that I've seen on the media doesn't even discuss that. And I'm just going like, it's so disgusting.
Well, the tough part is,
if you can for free.
The tough part is, Nick, just as you pointed out why you want Stanford over Florida State, what was it? Money. It's everything that we have in our society is focused on how much money you can make from me.
Correct.
So when we're talking about they're not telling people about how, scholarships and so on and so, no, they're trying to, but who has more money? The banks pushing the loans or the individuals trying to give out scholarships? It's obviously the banks pushing the loans. So if the media is controlled by money, which one is going to get more notoriety? So we can't land everything on the schools. They're not telling them. It's the fact that since we have created a society that's
you're right, Jacoby. If you want to look at a conspiracy, you have a whole conspiracy between the education department. Now, when I was teaching at Northeastern, I'm looking for my Northeastern Cup at Northeastern University, there was a wall between me and what the students were paying. I had no clue if they were free or they were paying. But if they were paying the tuition, it could be like $60,000 a year. Professors are kind of kept away from that whole thing. But the administration isn't. And that's the one reason, Duke, Dartmouth, Columbia, a lot of these schools just settled for over $100 million. They got sued as a class action suit. And what they were doing is they were trying to squeeze every dollar out of the student applicant. It was basically capitalistic, disgusting.
I hear what you're saying and everything.
It really made the press, then it disappeared.
No, it didn't make the press at all.
Actually conspired to screw your kids out of the most money, that they could on their tuition. I mean, it's just the American
No,
education.
but Rick, I see that you
Hold
got
on,
a question. You
go
got
back
to take
to
it as well.
why.
So my wife has worked in college admissions at a couple of high schools, and we watch it get worse every year because more students apply to more colleges every year than the year before. So the average, like, highly qualified student probably applies to 14 different schools. When I was applying to colleges, 20% of the applicants to Harvard got in. So you can pretty much figure out your chances. Are you a really, really good student? You got a good chance. Now the rate of admissions is 3% because every kid applying to Harvard is also applying to 13 other schools. 68,000 kids applied to Cornell last year. 63,000 didn't get in. And all those kids and their parents are all freaking out. And that, you know, and if kids are applying to 14 schools this year, in 2 years, they'll be applying to 16 schools, and the admission rates will go down even further. And everybody goes, it makes families crazy. There is one good thing with the Ivies. If you make less than about 150 grand, your parents, your schooling is free. They have very generous packages for middle class and below families.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, I saw we got
college-
Steve with us and everything, but just
Yeah, the
really
co-
quickly, Lee Newton Rhodes was saying that he was arguing that we should abolish federal student aid and colleges should be the issuers. But I was wondering y'all's thoughts around that, because he's saying that we don't need federal student aid, that the colleges should issue the money from their side, if I'm understanding him correctly and everything.
Well,
Disagree.
I feel like that student loans were developed to help people by offering low interest loans to students. But the way it works now is not that way. You've got these big students, you know, accumulate. If you go to med school, you can be 200 grand, $250,000 in debt, and that debt is not dischargeable by bankruptcy.
Right. By the way, what you just said is right. What happened was this: your Republican friends created the Bankruptcy Abuse and Consumer Protection Act in 2005. In that law, they made student loans non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. Seriously, that started the whole student loan scandal that exists today, that's now over $1 trillion. And it was the fault of the Republicans who said, well, we're going to create this non-dischargeable debt. Now, when it was dischargeable, you didn't have this runaway debt that you do today. And so my opinion is they should all eat it. So that's me.
Yeah, just want to hear from Steve, because I heard that one of his good friends was trying to get one of those bipartisan deals out there and everything, and all along those lines, and it even floated the notion that he might be willing to run as a third-party candidate. So I have seen Manchin in the news once again, and all along those lines. So your friend is at it again, and I was just wondering your thoughts about this bipartisan deal and even Manchin's involvement with it, because apparently that one is the one that got shot down. But who knows? Maybe he'll come up with
I forgot to.
another one.
Well, I just put in my newsletter yesterday that it was shot down, and then I forgot to put today that there's another effort to get $60 billion to Ukraine. But I'll be doing, hopefully it'll pass. I don't think it has much legs, but I've heard rumors that Manchin will run again for the presidency. I just don't think third parties have a chance. I disagree with David Walker on this. I think that we're a two-party system, and to get in the primaries, I think a third party does become a spoiler. That if basically third party gets in, I think it helps Trump more. But I'm hoping to bring Manchin. I'm meeting Andrew Yang on February 21st. He's coming here to speak, and he's the leader of the Forward Party, which is kind of a no labels organization. He ran for president in 2020. We'll see where that goes. But Mark, Manchin. My dream ticket's Chambers Manchin or Manchin Chambers, two West Virginians, one a Republican or independent and a billionaire, and then one a U.S. senator. But real quickly, internationally, we've got a situation going on we have a situation going on in Israel where Netanyahu is completely unwilling to accept a ceasefire. So this thing is just, I don't know whether peace is in sight. We're seeing this issue infiltrate locally here with, Palestinian protests. There's been some deaths in Pakistan as they're going through elections. We often forget that over half the world's population will be going through elections in this next cycle, including India, the world's largest democracy. But, in the United States, all eyes are on the U.S. election, the presidential. Now, I will say this, and I know Jatovi and Mark and I probably wouldn't be happy about it, but the latest polling I had actually has Trump up by 4 in North Carolina. But the good news is Josh Stein is up by 4. So I think you're going to see possibly a repeat of Trump winning North Carolina. Maybe they can narrow that margin down. I don't think Biden can win North Carolina, but I think you're going to see you could see Trump victory in North Carolina and Josh Stein as the next governor, which is looking likely. That his polling is going up, and Mark Robinson's polling in the general election is going down, which for all of us, in my opinion, is a good thing. But I think it's not good news for Democrats down the ballot, just because of the fact that these things carry over. Hard to believe that Trump can win North Carolina. I guess we see in North Carolina, in Durham and Cary and Morrisville, that isn't the North Carolina out there across the state.
Well, North Carolina is very much a swing state. I was actually talking about that earlier, and there is definitely, as I like to jokingly say, and I've only partially jokingly, we are the state that gave you both Jesse Helms and Terry Sanford. So if you're talking about two opposite extremes and everything, that has always been North Carolina. So it is definitely a progressive state, but it is known for giving a lot of various interests. And Jatovi, I think you'll agree with me. We are also the state that has a very strong community, but we also have a very strong Christian right community as well. So we definitely have a lot of extremes on a lot of the different levels of politics and social issues and a number of other things as well. So that's why I'm always interested in which way the state goes on elections, because we are a true swing state. In 1 minute we might go Democratic, the next minute we may go Republican. And as you just put it, Steve, there are some pockets that are very liberal, like Durham and Chapel Hill, and I would argue partially Charlotte, even though Charlotte has an active business community, and definitely Greensboro. But there are some very conservative parts of the state. They like Victoria.
There are some very conservative parts. Remember, North Carolina also has Tom Tillis and Virginia Fox that's representing us. Virginia Fox is really out there. She is, some of the stuff that she said about the school board, she's crazy. But yeah, that's representative of North Carolina at this moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Rick Rosner has a point.
Yep,
so I believe that Trump has been underperforming his polls in Iowa, North Carolina. It becomes harder and harder to get accurate results from polls because people say F you when you call them up and ask. If it used 30 years ago, 1 person in 3 would say yes. Now it's less than 1 person in 500. And is that 1 person out of 500 crazy or not? Some polling companies have such a problem getting people to take the polls that they've developed a pool of people who get polled again and again. And if that pool is contaminated with lunatics, then who knows, so I think the polls are contaminated to the tune of maybe 2%, giving Trump 2% more credit, which in some states is enough to make a difference.
No, it definitely doesn't make a difference.
But you could have a Democrat. I think the problem in North Carolina is that we don't have a straight party ticket voting anymore. So what happens is that everyone's going to go in to run for president and governor, and then there's a drop off, right? So like Josh Stein will get Republican Trump voters that vote for him. That's how our current governor won. But then down the ballot, those Republicans might either not vote. They might, now I think there's questions of, if I were the Democrats, I would also be focusing on not only Black voters, but Hispanic voters, because it does seem that the Republican Party is gaining ground with Hispanic voters. And that's not good. I mean, in terms of so we have a large growing Hispanic population here, and hopefully there's efforts being made to reach out to those folks. But, it's go ahead, Rick.
So Trump loses the popular vote in 2016 by 2.85 million. In 2020, he loses the popular vote by 2.5 times that much, 7 million. And it's not like he's been doing a better job of looking like a responsible dude since 2020. Since 2020, there's been the insurrection, there's been the sexual assault verdicts against him. But 2020, COVID made it easy for people to vote by mail. And then the Republicans saw how easy it was and how badly they lost. So now it's tougher to vote. So you have all these trends working in different directions.
Hey, Rick, along those same lines, because there is a senator's race or a race that's coming up and everything, or a definitely thing that might even be House now that I think about it along those lines. But the migration issue is part of what is playing into that. So they are saying that if we are looking at the Democratic bid to regain George Santos as a seat and all along those lines, and that is a House seat now that I'm looking at the notes and everything, that the migrant crisis is part of the complication because we know a lot of migrants were sent from Texas and other places to New York. So this is definitely something that could impact the elections. I was just wondering, apparently the Democrats hold a slim lead.
What pundits are saying is that if the Republicans can make immigration the number one issue in people's minds, then they win. If the Democrats can make the economy the number one, or anything but immigration the number one issue, then the Republicans lose.
So yeah, that's a good point. And I think that, and Rick, and we're going to be talking more about this on World Politics this evening. But that's a really, really great point. I mean, I think a lot of it's about the messaging. I mean, Trump does do a better job of simplifying, really focusing on the border, number one, that it's a mess. The second point that he will make is that prices are going up. They are, even though inflation is coming down. And he'll just say that the world is not safer for that reason, even though I don't think it was safer with him as the president, that we have this war in Israel, we have this war in Ukraine. People are attacking America. We need a strong president. Republicans have always been stronger in foreign policy, typically, in the modern era. And now you've got Joe Biden, who can say, we're not in a recession. I invested in infrastructure. Look at these things going on. But a lot of it will be, are we going to be in a recession in 8 months or not? But that's a good point. And I think it's really going to come down to that, conveying that to the American people.
But Rick, hold on a second. Hold on a second, because I want to bring in something else to the conversation, because there was another news that came out of Mexico in the whole migrant conversation, because I know that when Sasha does his show, he calls it Ukraine, Russia, China, and there's a reason. And I know that even Nick talks about the Chinese involvement in world politics and everything. But there is a new leader in terms of imports that are coming to the United States and everything. And it just got announced recently. Can any of you guess who that new leader is in terms of the biggest bilateral trading partner and all along those lines? Because they just became the new leader as of last year and everything. So China is not the top importer and all along those lines. So are you have anybody's idea, or does anybody listening have any idea who has overtaken China as the leading sources of goods imported to the United States?
I'll guess India, just because they're huge, bigger than China now.
No, you're absolutely wrong. The leading importer of goods, and they just overtook it. PBS reported it, CNN reported it, and it comes back to what we're talking about with Mexico. Mexico is now the leading importer of sources to goods to the United States. So Mexico has taken over that role and everything.
I think that in tapping on that role, which is why a lot of people don't really want the border. Well, a lot of businesses don't want the border physically shut down because you have trade right there. But yes, Rick is right. And Rick and Steve both are right. It's about messaging, because truthfully, immigration. For me personally, I don't want to hear any Republican talk about immigration right now, because it lies at the feet of them. Because there was a bill, everything that they had asked for, the majority of things that they had asked for and got negotiated, and it was a bipartisan bill. They were the ones that shot it down. It doesn't matter. They can complain that, Biden has legal authority now. He truthfully doesn't, because everything Trump tried to shut down the border in 2019. Well, tried to shut down the government in 2019 when there was an immigration spike, and to get his stuff across, again, he tried to force the shutdown of the government. All that got caught up in legal. He couldn't govern by executive order, but now they're saying that Joe Biden can circumvent the system and just go about his business governing by executive order. Mexico has already stated that they are unwilling to do the stay in Mexico stuff that was there because of Title 42, which was a COVID bill that was dealing with COVID. And we also have to, again, look at the reason why immigration is an issue and what's going on, not only in the South, but also everywhere. What is happening and what's creating that migration? Because of global warming is a part, global warming, climate change is a part, as well as, tons of other things, a myriad of things, from, drug cartels to better life, searching for a better life, and a whole bunch of other things. But immigration is going to be an issue, and it is the messaging. And both the Democrat Party and the Republican Party know this. Currently, the Republican Party, because they know they have failed on even presenting a bill when they had both the House and the Senate under Trump, they didn't present a bill there, even though there was a spike. They didn't. They presented HR 2, which was dead on arrival from Senate Republicans who said that. So they didn't even negotiate or attempt to negotiate a bill now. All they did was complain and go to the border. I think it was actually yesterday when the bill failed. The lead negotiator from the Republican Party, who is a diehard, big time Republican, even talked about it, tried to lean on the better angels of the Republican Party, talking about, hey, look, I was given this pen to sign bills and sign legislation. I can do, stump speeches and presentations from anywhere in the world, but I can only sign laws here. We're here to negotiate and create laws. But the Republican Party said no because Trump said no. He wants chaos at the border. And their messaging right now is that, Joe Biden has the legal authority, can do the laws. Well, Texas is in court with them right now and actually having an armed standoff, blocking Eagle Pass and other areas of Texas. So now the Border Patrol really cannot do their job. You have Republicans that won't give funding to the border. So now you cannot have beds and other facilities, taken care of. It's just the messaging is going to be the key. And if we are honest about the messaging right now, the immigration issue is a problem for the Republican Party if people can understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I think there's one more huge issue, which is how fast voters are going crazy.
Yeah.
We've seen over the past 15 years that being bombarded on social media makes people crazy. And I would argue that most of the people in America have had COVID at least once, and a lot of them. And COVID can cook your brain a little bit. If the national IQ is dropping because of COVID, because of propaganda, because of an aging population, because when you think of the average Fox News viewer, you think of somebody in their 70s, eating it all up.
And check this out. This is where it's getting really scary and really crazy because, Steve, our favorite thing, AI. They've also caught robocalls coming from the Joe Biden robocalls, which they aren't Joe Biden. There is an AI tech company. I think they tracked it down to 2 companies in Texas that were putting out robocalls where it had Joe Biden's voice telling Democrat voters not to go and vote at particular times. Oh, you don't need to go and vote for the primary. Go and vote only in November. So they were using AI technology for robocalls. Trump's campaign was trying to show off how they had African Americans going into neighborhoods and talking and showing how other Black voters wanted to vote Trump. Well, those pictures were done by AI because if you look closely at those pictures, There's a gentleman with 3 arms. There's a Trump shirt, but people aren't. And that the scary part is people will look at these AI photos and won't notice the fact that they are AI photos. They will just sit there and say, hey, there are black people talking about Trump. And so there are these people that like Trump and they're utilizing this AI technology to fool people. But AI technology right now is so bad with hands and fingers and particular things, but people aren't going to notice because one, they're going to fall into their silos and only, well, this is true because it comes from Trump. This is true because it's coming from, and it's sad. That's the reality that we are right now.
Yeah.
So Jacoby, was Tim Scott sitting behind Donald Trump and supporting him? Was that artificial intelligence?
No, that was just Tim Scott and I hate to use this term. Okay. That was Tim Scott begging and pleading and embarrassing black people. That is what Tim Scott did. Okay. Because the way he walked up after this man literally embarrasses him in a speech in front of him, and he goes up, yes, sir, I just wanted to come up here and tell you I love you. Yeah, okay. All right, dog. Yeah.
Well, but anyway, it's closing time at the end of the show. We got Sasha if he has any insight about the Ukraine deal, whether we're going to see it coming. Obviously, the $1 billion done, but they're looking at $60 billion. But oh yeah, by the way, we forgot to mention a Russian presidential candidate. I can't remember his name.
I mentioned at the beginning he dropped out, the pro-peace candidate.
Yeah.
And also, did we mention that Nikki Haley, Mike Pence in the primary lost to none of the above?
We did mention that as well. They lost to none of the above and everything. And I was going to mention just really quickly, I do want to hear from Sasha as well. I was going to mention to Lee Newton Rhodes that there's a lot of people that are preparing, because one of the things we talk about on the news sometimes, and particularly World Edition, is this notion of climate change and all along those lines. So apparently January was one of the hottest months ever recorded. And I remember some statistics like that last year. But there is a total solar eclipse. So maybe Marianne Williamson, who has now dropped out of the race, could have predicted that as well. But apparently a lot of people are getting prepared, including in Rochester, Michigan, and everything else, because it's supposed to take place in April. But I guess folks are getting prepared for it, and maybe it can impact people's mindset, to Rick's point, because they do say that sometimes people's mindsets and everything else can be impacted during a solar eclipse, and that has been something that's been put out there historically and all along those lines.
Climate change is something that always gets pushed to the back of people's minds by immediate concerns. Biden broke a ton of his campaign promises. We are digging more oil out of the ground under Biden than we ever did under Trump. And, that's terrible for climate change, but it's good for the economy. And so when it comes, climate change is probably not in most people's top 3 or top 5 things to freak out about with the coming election.
I would agree with that and everything. Sasha, your take on what's going on? I know that you mentioned it somewhat.
It's all the climate issue. It's such a waste of anybody's time and intelligence, even to think about it. It's taken in million years. The temperature will change 2 degrees or maybe 1.5 or so on. It just doesn't make any sense even to discuss the climate change. It's a loser right from the beginning. It's a waste of time. It's something to benefit a few people who are in the business to promote the climate change, so they will make their fees and their contractual dollars. Probably they're paid $250,000 a year. That's only people who benefit from all this purpose of climate change. Nothing else, nobody else, no country or state or city or anything benefits from it, because it's a nature, and because of the nature, our winter now is much warmer in Toronto than say 10, 15, 20 years ago. Great, I want to make it even warmer if possible. I don't know what I have to do for that, but that's great. And I don't see, but it could be colder as well. So what do I have to even to think about it? Whatever nature dictates.
In California, it's getting warmer.
So climate change is a huge business opportunity. The Netherlands put in this huge sea gate that's like a quarter-mile long, this giant thing that swings shut when the rising ocean is about to flood them out. And you're going to need to put those around Miami, Lower Manhattan, New Orleans, and the companies that make the stuff to protect the companies that build fireproof cement houses, those or 3D print cement houses, those companies will do well, as wildfires get more pervasive so I don't know that it's a political opportunity, but it's going to be a huge business opportunity.
Speaking of business
Folks,
opportunities,
we're over the
get
hour,
out of
so
here.
I've got to run. We'll see you tonight at World Politics. Mark, send me the link just in case. I'll be there
Yes.
at
Please
5
send
in
it
like
to me.
30 minutes.
Yep.
Have a great day,
I'll send
everybody. And things are moving forward. It's a changing world out there. We're going to talk next week about the Internet of Things and bring in some special guests to talk about technology, AI, and what it means for our future. Thank you all so much. We're back next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Or tomorrow.